Welcome to the Great Distraction.
Hello again, everyone. This is The Great Distraction, and today the topic of discussion is loneliness of humanity. My name is Ben. With me today are my co-hosts Thomas.
How's it going?
And Glenn.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. The Great Distraction is a podcast that focuses on a vast and random range of topics, and we hope that each episode leaves you with, if nothing else, something to ponder. As always, we'd love to hear from you. Questions, comments, and topic suggestions are always welcome. You can contact us on Facebook or by email at greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com. And just a reminder, if you're listening to us on an Apple device, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out in rankings with Apple, and we appreciate the love just all around. Loneliness of humanity. Let's start off real quick by throwing down a quick kind of definition of what area specifically this is. Because for me, the first thing I thought of when we started trying to lay out the notes for this topic was you hear the term loneliness, and I don't know, maybe I'm alone.
I feel so alone.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'm alone in this. Pun intended. But the first thing I think of is usually the typical application of sadness and depression and things of an individualistic nature. That is kind of not what we're hoping to focus on with this topic, but rather the concept as it applies on a foundational level for all of humanity. So an inherent subconscious part of the human condition that we all, I don't want to say equally suffer from, but that is equally present in all. Did I define that?
Yeah, I think you
that makes sense.
hit it right there.
Okay, so
I'm following you.
yeah, I don't want to focus on the depression side of it. I do believe that they are connected to some degree and in some ways, not always, but I do believe that the depressive and the sadness and that type of side on an individualistic basis.
But this is more of a bigger conversation.
Yeah, this
of
is
humanity.
Yeah, so exactly. I didn't want to get too caught up in the psychology of depression because that's a whole other topic on its own, and thankfully one I'm.
Don't want to venture into.
I don't really want to venture into it. I'm not intimately involved with that one. This one I can relate
You're
more
not
to.
intimately involved with your loneliness.
With my so lonely, man. Okay, So how are humans alone with respect or from this approach? One of the first things that I wanted to use to describe this, and we were kind of talking about it before we started recording to hopefully expand on it a little more here, and it's our, ironically enough, as we were communicating, it's our lacking ability to communicate.
How flawed are our communication methods? I mean, there's so much that you can
not tell,
right?
Not tell each other, right? And by that we mean human beings cannot actually share emotions, thoughts, feelings, any of our perception of our five physical senses: taste, touch, hearing, seeing, smelling. We cannot share our experiences. And keep in mind, when I say share, I don't mean, hey, let me tell you about this, or hey, let me write a story about this, and you read it or you listen. That is not the level of sharing. You don't share, by doing it that way, you are not actually sharing or passing along the actual thought, feeling, emotion, physical sense. When I tell Thomas how the pizza we just ate smelled, he's like, yeah, man, I smelled it too. But did he actually smell it the same way I smelt it? And then Glenn dealt it.
So it's the same question. Is the same shade of brown what I'm seeing? No. Is that what you are perceiving as well?
Frustrates the hell out of me, man.
Yeah, just think about that. If you could share a memory or an event with somebody and include the way that you felt as far as your other senses other than just memory recall.
Well, sure. And you'd be able to pass on your interpretations of the situation, and somebody can really sit in and understand from your point of view. We lack that in our communications. Yeah. So ultimately, we are alone in our heads. Nobody else can hear what's clicking in my mind.
Can you imagine how many how much more in agreement and in unison and closer to a utopia we would be if we could just pass on to each other simple concepts that we believe, feel, think, whatever.
Well, we need a new way to communicate that's nonverbal. I mean, we
need the
visual cues.
We need the matrix plugs in the back of our heads.
But what about like the Vulcan death grip?
How does the death grip? No. You mean what you're talking about?
No, that's not the death grip. It's the other one. They have the Vulcan
The
one. Has
transfer,
one
the mind meld. The mind meld.
Is that what it's
Oh
called?
man, if you're a Trekkie out there and know what that is,
The Vulcan. What is that again?
The Vulcan.
Is it the mind melt?
Mind meld. Yeah, it's a mind meld. Boy, if you know what that is,
And they can recall and
kudos to you. When I was listening that out, let me, if you noticed or caught it or not, and you do not know, because I did not know, there actually is a difference between emotions and feelings. And I pulled a quick little quip off of a Google search that kind of put it into a sentence, but I'll try and add, I guess, a little more to it after that. If I don't know, it's kind of complex sounding at first, but if you think about it and chew on it for a little bit, I'm sure it'll make more sense to you. Emotions are event-driven, and how I think of it is invoked, while feelings are learned behaviors that are usually in hibernation until triggered by an external event. Unlike happiness, for example, is a feeling, joy is an emotion that involves little cognitive awareness. We feel good without consciously deciding to, and it's longer lasting. So almost like emotions are the triggers that trigger a learned behavior, which is the feeling. That's it, exactly. I had to sit there and think about this for a while, and then you have to apply it to situations in your own life, and it's not the topic of it's not the topic of discussion today. But I'm actually thinking, did we do an episode on emotion? We did an episode on emotions, yeah. And I think I was talking about how you could retrain your emotional reactions, right?
Right.
I think that's a little bit along the lines of how you could retrain your feelings based on a triggered emotional response, or rather, your emotional response might even be the same thing as feelings. I don't know. That's some deeper psychological stuff that I have not read into yet.
We have to get the bowl out for that one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Get the bong. That's a bong story.
The bong story. Sit around the peace pipe, Wesley pipes. So all we have to communicate with each other is external means, and by that I mean verbal, written accounts, visual representations such as pictures, videos, or diagrams, but all of those are based upon the perception of the receiver, and the applied and the comprehension of that is going to be based on their collection of experiences and how they apply it to what it is they're receiving. So even if you found the perfect way to, here's a video that depicts what I'm talking about, and a picture and a diagram, and I've written up this essay, and I'm going to verbally sit here for an hour and talk to you about it. You may be satisfied with the message that you have transmitted to this individual, the other individual, but what they receive still, even after all of that, may be something different, because they are perceiving it based on their own, I don't want to say set of restrictions, but their own guidelines or boundaries, of what they've accumulated in their life.
Sure, and how much of that information that you're presenting is stuff that this person may have already processed,
or have never processed.
Sure, but I mean, look, you look around, you see a color. As an infant, when you first were exposed to that color, your brain processed that information and pretty much stored what that means in your mind.
Yeah.
So when we see that color, we
filled with associations.
Right. Yeah. So we already have a pre-processed, a preconceived notion of what this thing means.
Yep.
So we are looking through our world through filters.
Yeah.
So when you expose somebody to an idea or a concept, they are still filtering it through stuff that they have previously processed. It's not true open thought.
Yeah. Definitely plays on our nature of being creatures of habit. I mean, we are creatures of habit in like our routines for every day, but you're also creatures in habit for how you perceive the world, taste food, look at a color, anything.
Absolutely.
You've all learned since you were very little. So obviously, this makes it very difficult to share perspective or life experiences. In essence, when you have them alone. and it is a very frustrating thing. It has been for me personally most of my life. Set up even worse. I think the first time I tried a psychedelic, it was extremely everything that I experienced in that, and that's kind of summed it up with all the most beautiful things that I've seen in my life. Were not just from those events, but that event, those events, and others. I can never share with anyone. And you come out of that first experience, assuming it was a good one, and you had maybe typically the most superficial things people can take from psychedelic trips is the visual hallucinations, depending on what you can't say that word, depending on what you took or whatever. And you come out of that, and those are often the most easily beautiful things to describe, right? Because we can usually describe we're very good because we're very practiced at describing our visual intake or our visual experiences.
Sure.
And you can sit there and talk your face off, and it's really funny to talk to somebody who's, tripped recently for the first time or whatever. They can talk about that experience for days, right? Trying to put it all into words. And still, you still have not passed what you saw at all. I mean, all they can do, especially if you're talking to somebody who's never had that experience before themselves, they have zero frame of reference. You're no frame of reference here, Donnie. You're out of your element.
Right. I mean, you can look at visual, some artwork, things that kind of give an impression of the experience, but it's still not going to hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the first time, that was one of the things I did. I took some pictures after we came down of the area that we were in, and I took it into Photoshop trying to, because I knew of a filter that was very close to one of the effects that I was seeing, right? And I tried to filter, I filtered that image out, and then I tried to show it to my brother and show, hey, man, this is what I was seeing. Did it look like this to you? And he's looked at it and was like, dude, no, not at all. It looked like this. And he started describing something completely different. So even while you're sitting there with your buddies, all under the same influence, and you're sitting there thinking, man, you're all three or whatever. All of you are amazed at what you're looking at. You're just in awe and you can't stop staring. And neither of you are seeing anything near the same. It's ridiculous to think about because that same separation, that same segregation, that same inherent for the purposes of this topic, that inherent loneliness is present at all times, and it was present right there. And it's just one example. I mean, it can be anything from watching your first kid born to watching your father pass.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Well, I mean, the human condition is your own personal experience, and if, for a lack of a better term, you are alone in this personal experience. So, as advanced as we think we are, just like we've had this conversation already about how you can describe or relate an event that happened to you, but you can through a language that we all share, you can sort of describe maybe the anxiety that you felt or the happiness that you felt, but you can't really share those experiences because it's yours. And, I hear it all the time when we talk about the loneliness of humanity. Humanity has this condition where we are alone in our own venture. And your life is what you make of it. Everything you do is what you make of it. You can only share so much of these experiences. So to me, it seems like it would be amazing if you could share like everything from the energy of how you felt about a situation, maybe the anxiety or the anger or the happiness or whatever. You can verbally try to describe those, but we're all living inside of our own head. And we are our own entity, whatever you believe in. We've talked about this before. I believe that we're all just energy. So, your trip through this world, lifetime, whatever it is, it's really hard to share that with somebody because no matter how you use the terminology or language to share that, they're never going to see what you saw. They're never going to understand what you saw. They're never going to interpret the same experience the way that you did. And I think that's where we get the loneliness sometimes, is because that's our own individual experience of life.
Yeah, definitely. Worse than that, even the descriptive terms that we all seem to that we all use and then generally accept, sadness, happiness. You ask somebody,
they mean different things to different people.
That's part of the big. That's exactly what I was trying to allude to. There is somebody asks. It's something me personally I've had a problem with most of my life. Somebody would ask me, "Are you happy?" Well, wait, yeah, that's such a huge loaded question to me. It's like, well, wait a minute. what do you define as happy? Or and how do you feel happiness?
Is happiness an emotion or a feeling? Is it a reaction to an event, or is it a state of being?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a huge question, and one I've found difficult to answer every time I've been asked it, because of that very reason. Is how do you define what is happiness, and then how do you know that your definition is what it's supposed to be, quote unquote? Because what do you mean? What is it? What is it supposed to be? I don't know. It's completely made up, but it does exist to some degree. I mean,
and everybody's view of what someone else experiences is completely different. And to I guess, for a lack of a better way of explaining it, people a lot of times will look at somebody who's like famous or rich or something, and say, well, I don't understand why they're not happy.
Yeah.
They have all the money, they have all this fame, they have all these things. They have all these things I don't have. Why are they not happy?
Yeah.
Well, they're living in their own solitude world too, their own life experience. So no matter what you add to that experience, whether it's money, fame, cars, big house, or whatever, you're still living inside your own head.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this a little bit before. Is when you're alone with your own thoughts, that's the real you. Mm-hmm. That's your life experiences. That's your travel through this time that you have on this earth, or whatever we want to call it. And so every individual has to use that time to make peace with themselves, to understand themselves, to grow. And, I've said this to my single friends all the time. People are single. They're like, oh, I'm single, I'm lonely. I'm like, don't be lonely. Don't look at this as a lonely experience. You didn't fail because you're not in a relationship. You're not unworthy because you're not with another person. That's a totally manufactured cultural stigma that you've been forced to adhere to, regardless of if it means anything to you or not, because the bigger picture is how you can live this life and experience things and to grow as an individual. But we have this giant cultural thing that sets almost like a level of what happiness and what loneliness is. And if you don't adhere to these certain things, you're lonely, or you're not as valuable as the next person, or whatever. So when you go into the terminology of, like I was saying before, about someone has a bunch of money or they're famous or whatever, and somebody else can look at that from an outside perspective and say, well, why are they lonely? Why aren't they happy? They have all these things I don't have. If you break down the human condition, we're all living inside our own head. And until you can get to a point where you're okay with yourself and you can be peaceful with your own ideas and your own position in life, you're always going to be lonely, because it's only you on this ride. And I've said this before, people come in and out of your life all the time, whether they're relationships, family members, or whatever. Nothing's forever. The only forever you have is your time on this earth. That's your adventure. That's your time.
Speaking of on this earth, that was actually my next type of loneliness humans have always suffered from, as far as long as our existence, at least as far as we know, anyway.
To our knowledge.
Yeah, to our knowledge, we feel alone in the universe, as there's no other intelligent beings to interact with. We feel like we are the only ones. I've played with this idea, I don't know, many times over the course of my life, because I love sci-fi, so it's always there in the back of my head. And I think most of us at the table do too. And I've often thought, can you imagine if we had a reason as all humans to band together, how quickly all of our differences and nations and religions and everything would all go away if we had a common goal. Human beings are, if nothing else, survivors. And if we had, let's say, an alien attack, you better believe all the borders that exist would come crumbling down so that we, as quick as possible, so that we could band together to figure out how to universally fight against a new oppressor, a larger oppressor, or other side of the same coin, I should say. I imagine that if we did find another species and they were like, hey, we got this way, way more amazing existence right over here. If you guys can just all band together, build a whole bunch of ships and figure out how to move yourselves off there and come over to our planet where we've got this amazing stuff figured out that we can't bring to you, I better believe, probably all the rich would leave and leave the rest of us. But nevertheless, let's say if they said it was all or nothing, right? You better believe we'd come together, borders and every differences all set aside, and we'd band together, and we would no longer be alone. part of this loneliness that humans suffer from is the reason we create all these borders and, oh, my side's better than yours. And we are fairly small-minded because we've never seen anything outside of this ball that we're on. The minute something else does come that shows us, hey, man, there's there's something way bigger than us, like another species that's more advanced, or many other species that are more advanced, and we want to be a part of that, we would stop fighting amongst ourselves. And
I don't know that we would.
I think in time, maybe not right away, but I mean, I think in time people would want to, because right now your only difference is that you can create. It is natural for humanity to segregate. Like a lot of animals do that too. Think of the wolf or the dog mentality. The pack mentality is our pack, that pack, territorialism, right? We are we are territorial like animals.
We are animals.
Yeah, but if you and you take, we absolutely are. But like for example, since I'll take the case of dogs again, when natural disasters occur and whole cities flood or tornadoes destroy everything, the pets that are out everywhere that were the ones that were barking at each other from across the neighborhoods all night, they would if they had the chance they'd tear each other apart or whatever. They act violently to defend their territory, right? But when all those boundaries and those borders get broken down, i.e., the tornado rolls through and destroys all the houses and the fences, everything, the rescue teams move in and they find all the dogs of different shapes and sizes and species running together, because now the borders are gone. There's a new threat, and now the key to survival is each other. Human beings would very much do the same thing, I think, over time. We just need to know that we need to see that there's something else bigger than us, and that we are now a smaller part of what we had segregated here, and that there's a reason to band together to try to be a bigger part of some larger entity. Be it another galaxy, be it another larger planet, be it multiple races that are out there. Yeah.
But that's assuming we're not alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, but it's something, whether or not you believe any of that's possible doesn't matter. That's beside the point. Whether or not you use your imagination to think about that kind of stuff is also beside the point. The fact is that it comes from considering how human beings would react if all of a sudden we weren't the only intelligent beings within our perception.
It's like it would almost force us to.
That's where I'm looking for. Force you.
It would have to force you to say, okay, I'm okay with us all being different because we're all humans. And so at the end of the day, it'd be sort of like we're banding together because we're humans, and now there's this new entity that is unhuman to us. So our only means of survival is for us to group together. That might be the only way that humans would ever do that. And I think one of the things too is, as far as the, coming together like that, I think there needs to be some humbling among human existence as well before we could come together like dogs do.
Well, that will come with either a disaster or a common goal to work towards, right?
Because it would humble people to not be so.
But even in those situations, somebody's going to be trying to take advantage of improve their own station.
Right. Somebody's going to try to be in charge.
We do exist
Absolutely.
only in our minds. So a lot of people do not, you'll be compassionate towards somebody else or try to help out others around you to keep your community or whatnot thriving. But ultimately, your perspective and your focus is very self-centered. It's self-serving. Everything we do.
As an individual and the existence of an individual, it's almost like it's like you don't even have a choice.
Right.
That just kind of is the way.
It's part of our survival mechanism.
Part of our survival mechanism, yeah. And it's kind of crazy too, because like when it comes to going back to the conversation of we all live in our own head. We all, everybody who can think, see, smell, talk, walk, whatever. We're all alone. No matter if we have friends, family that are close, siblings, kids that we hang out with, whatever. No matter what, you're still. This adventure, this ride that we're on, this whatever time frame that we're on this earth or whatever you want to call it, it's still your own solo adventure. You can remove people or add people at will. It's your discretion. And just like Glenn was saying before, your perspective or your view of it. And sometimes I bring, everybody gives me crap about this because I bring up things like serial killers and stuff like that because socially they're they're an anomaly to the human race of how people think and perceive things, and the ability, and Glenn and I have had this conversation a bunch, there is no reality.
No.
There's what you make a reality.
It's your perception.
It's your perception of reality. So when you're living in that, your own world inside your head, the perception of reality is only what you make of it. So when you're on the solo ride by yourself and you're intermingling with other humans and things, you have to go out of your way to make those decisions to be cordial with people, or to be a group with people, or to become a group with other people, or to be social with people, whether they're your family, people you work with or whatever. You're still, this is your own mind. You're still in your own mind. And I think one of the biggest problems that people have is they depend on other people and other aspects to satisfy what they consider their individual loneliness or their placement and value in life. And none of that matters, because as we were talking before, Glenn, it's purely based on your perception.
Absolutely. Well, and kind of a fun thing to think about, our brains, this mash of neurological tissue, which, I mean, think of when you're sleeping, how much conscious thought do you have? How aware are you of time passing when you are asleep?
Very little. That's the point of that condition.
Very little, right? So our brains exist in a space that's without consciousness. Our brain, during our waking phase, projects this thing that we are able to perceive and translate our environment through, which is our conscious mind. It's our awareness. But it is simply a projection of this organic machine. It's kind of fun to think about.
Yeah, and a whole other topic that we need to cover at some point too. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff as far as how we rebuild ourselves when we wake up, when we come out of sleep into our conscious state, and deconstruct it every night when we fall asleep. Anyway, though, Thomas, you did bring up when you started mentioning your family, you can be surrounded by your family and loved ones and friends and whatever. That may be a good transition to the next thing. Is we all die alone. And even with all those people around you, when people say that, what they mean is that you alone are taking that journey of death. No one else is coming with you. And obviously, that's how it was meant to be. And it sounds terrible to say that. And I know a lot of people, over the years, I've told that to people, and they really, a lot of them generally don't like to hear that. But the problem there that they're experiencing is that they immediately throw a positive or negative connotation onto it, and it is not. It is neither happy nor sad. It is just the way it was meant to be. This society that we are in our culture, we look at dying as such a negative, and that I don't know what they imagine exactly, because I've never really imagined it myself, that you are not alone when you die if you have all your family and friends and your belongings and whatever.
But you're still dying. That's and they're not. It's you.
Yeah, and you can't tell them what's happening in the trip, what happens, where you go afterwards. So you are doing it alone. We all do it alone. It's we come into this world alone in a sense, and we leave the world alone in that exact same sense. However you want to work that out in your head, the statement still stands. And yet, despite all of these definitions, and there's probably many more that we didn't
at
come
least
up
two
with,
more.
At least two, yeah. Just a couple more. Despite all of this inherent segregation we have, or we suffer from, if you will, we still have a strong need to feel connected to others. And, I mean, that sounds maddening. You're inherently alone. You fight to be not alone. You work to communicate, create relationships, establishments, whatever, to not feel alone, yet you are still alone. And it is it sounds maddening. It sounds crazy. There was one author that wrote. I didn't write down the name. I should have, but it was a psychologist that was writing about the inherent loneliness. And he stated that while this may be an underlying condition that is ever present, it does not always have its effect on us, meaning that we are not always apparently aware of it. And obviously some are more aware of it than others. And it depends on how, I don't know how exactly that works. Some people would be more susceptible to it. Others are,
I think people that are living more in the moment, you're not considering, you're not processing, you're not analyzing the concept or I don't know, internalizing how to say it. You're not really embracing the concept or putting your energy towards thinking about being an isolated being. You're just going out and doing and acting and
energy towards thinking. That's okay. So I was going to bring this up a little later, but I think right now is better. There was a couple of topics a couple of articles I was reading that were surrounding the topic that people who feel this more than others. Again, we're kind of getting into the individualistic nature of it, but I think it's applicable for why some are more aware of this than others. And the focus of these articles was, is this linked to intelligence? And I was thinking along the lines of the more you know you don't know. When you start considering the depth of certain things, it kind of lends to a certain level of isolation. Because the deeper you go, the more you realize that no one else will ever perceive the same things that you are perceiving, how you are perceiving them, and about the world around you, the way you do. So how could anyone truly understand you? And the deeper you go down that rabbit hole, the more you start to consider, wait, damn, I really am alone. Like, the three of us talk, and we talk a lot. Wait, so what is this? I don't even know what episode we're on now. 60. This will be, 60-something now. It depends on when we actually air this one. And we've discussed a lot of deep things, but no matter how deep we go, we will at some point each individually split off in our own Y direction, which will be our own personal Y direction, and the rest of us will go in different directions, and before long, we're not even on the same page on something we were on the same page in the beginning of, and that is that individualistic experience of life that Thomas was talking about earlier, but at the same time, it links back to what we started off here, is that the more intelligent an individual is and the more capable they are of deeper comprehension, deeper understanding, deeper analysis, and further going down that rabbit hole, the more you realize that nobody else is seeing this.
It's the more questions that you pose on the overall existence. That's why, we've all heard the phrase "ignorance is bliss."
Yeah. Yeah, I actually found there was I can't remember, I did not write them down, but if you're curious, you can Google it, I'm sure. Albert Einstein had multiple quotes that he was famous for, that were re-quoted many times, and he was famous for saying about loneliness, and basically they were to that degree, like the more you know, there was one in particular, was the more you know, the weirder you'll seem to others, something to that effect. That's not exactly what it was. And he made multiple quotes about being lonely after, just your knowledge makes you feel lonely.
Yeah, it isolates you.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a quote I found too. This one I didn't have. It was not linked to somebody, but I thought it kind of was relevant to the intelligence part. Loneliness truly is the tax that we pay to atone for a certain complexity of mind. Nothing comes without cost. If you want certain knowledges, you have to pay for them. Anyway, taking a step back here, I wanted to talk about that link to intelligence under the kind of pretense of, is this loneliness condition? How much of it is nature versus nurture?
How much of
this feeling of inherent loneliness? Because is it that it comes from, we're just birthed with it? So if we took a child right out of the womb and stuck it if you stuck it in a room by itself, it's going to feel pretty lonely. Yeah.
That's child abuse, Ben.
I guess I'm not running that experiment then, huh?
Can I borrow your kid?
So what I say, that was a theory or a hypothesis? Let's see if we could get Glenn started.
I think it's a felony.
I think you're right on that one. Let's say, if there were a way to... the example I was reading about this that gave me this idea of nature versus nurture is we are taught, their angle on this that I was reading in this particular article, we are brought up from children, taught to need mother's attention, need father's attention, need food, need drink, need entertainment, need. And we are offered these things because, well, I mean, who wants to hear a baby cry forever or a kid whine or whatever too long, right? It gets very annoying. So to some degree, the parent or somebody is going to enable this person to get what they want, and then from there, we kind of develop a sense that, well, there's always somebody there to help. There's always, I'm not alone. Essentially, I have this need, and there are other humans around me to interact with. If you were somehow able to change that, would there still be an inherent need or dependency upon others, such that you have the feeling of loneliness or emptiness because you didn't have that? I don't know if that makes too much sense. Do we breed this into each other, how we raise each other? Do we make it worse for ourselves? It's kind of what I'm asking, I think. What do you think?
Go ahead.
Well, I feel like it's a condition that we talk a lot about how we condition ourselves in life. We're conditioned to think a certain way, to feel a certain way, to respond a certain way. And I think that this could fall under that parameter of we're conditioned to feel that way. You're not alone if you have XXX. You know what I mean? This is, you're alone, but you have your mom. You're alone, but you have your siblings. We're conditioned to think these things so that we don't have to depend on ourselves. It's almost like an escape route.
So then does that make it worse when you don't have mom to take care of?
I think it does.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Instead of teaching children or younger people how to develop the skills, and I think what Glenn and I have talked about this before, about how modern day school doesn't teach
critical thinking. So the survival aspect of being alone is almost like a critical thinking situation, because if humanity is alone and you understand that this adventure that we're on is your own, and if we could teach people at an earlier age that it's okay to be alone, it's okay to be self-sufficient, here's the tools that you can develop to help you navigate through these times, maybe it wouldn't be such a predisposed condition like it is with having a mother or somebody to give you what you need when you feel that you're empty.
This reminds me of something I remember reading about. I completely forgot about this. I remember reading about a tribe or society. It was something third worldish. I can't remember now. That's not important though. What they would do is they would take the babies right after birth, and they would pass them out almost randomly to someone else, other people in the community to raise, and that was how nobody knew who was whose father, parent, whatever. And the community raised the people like that intentionally to breed a more independent being. Instead of relying on mom and dad and looking to them for every second, you relied upon a community that didn't have that super intense drive to take care of you, just to give you what you needed so that you can continue going on. Now, obviously, as an infant, you're going to need a lot more, okay? But when you turn 4, 5, 6, maybe you can go get your own coconuts down from the tree and feed yourself, or maybe you can go hold a fishing pole and, go fish for yourself and get your food for the night.
Or maybe it's different members of the tribe that can teach you those individual skills.
Yes, something like that. Yeah, and I remember, it was designed to breed a more independent and thusly more strong individual within their community, and strengthen the community as well. I can't remember now. Now I wish I would have thought of that beforehand, so I could have researched where that came from.
But I think when in our culture, for sure, I a long time ago, I think I figured out a way to, nobody likes to be alone, quote alone. Nobody likes to not have any friends, nobody to hang out with, nobody to do things with, nobody to share things with. I mean, obviously that's all lonely parts of social existence, but the bigger picture, and going back to the more intelligent you are, the more you question things, which makes you, almost puts you in a world of more solitude in some ways, because you're able to be alone with yourself and to think and to develop ideas and whatever it is. I think that's one thing about being an artist that's kind of nice, is I think a lot of artists are okay, and people like Einstein, people that are very progressive thinkers, they're okay with being alone because they understand the value of that time.
That was actually one of his quotes. He said, and I'm not going to try and regurgitate the quote here, but it was something to the effect of, the painfulness of the loneliness that I felt in youth was one thing, but nothing compared to the something the
I think
joy
I've
and the
heard this
creativity
before, yeah.
that I experienced, of the loneliness I experienced in maturity.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, but the thing is, like I feel like as a cultural thing, we don't teach people the strength that you have when you're alone.
No,
At
least on this culture.
we're very codependent.
Oh yeah, we want to coddle.
Yeah, we want to coddle. We're very codependent people. I can point out specific eras of my life where I was alone, where I maybe lived in a city where I didn't have a lot of friends. I wasn't dating somebody. I didn't have super close friends around. And the one thing about all of those events was, yeah, I was alone, but those were also the most productive moments of my life because I had nothing to focus on other than whatever I wanted to focus on.
Yeah, I found a lot of quotes and a lot of things talking about that loneliness actually breeds creativity.
It's a strength.
As long as you don't let it eat you up on the
Yeah.
individualistic basis and lead to the other things that can come with it, like the sadness or the depression or the negative side of it.
And I think that's one of the bigger things about people is that if we can understand the strength that you have during those times, you can change your entire life when you're not in a relationship, when you're not constricted by the basics of life that a lot of people are.
When you just have you to work on.
When you just have you to work on.
Unless you fall into the traps of today's distractions.
Absolutely.
We are in our society and where we're going in the younger generations and how things are pushing. We have social media. We have video games. You have TV. You have radio. You have all these things that distract us to absorb our attention so that we do not get good alone time with our thoughts.
Yeah, and you can talk to, I've got friends in all kinds of different realms of jobs and professions and things like that. And the one thing that all of those people agree with through the conversations I've had in this type of topic is that when you have that time alone to focus on yourself, to study things, or to not be interrupted to learn a new skill, or to work out a problem or a solution for something that you're trying to do, those are very powerful moments. And I think that when you talk about the cultural aspect of all those distractions, that's why those distractions are there, because if people could understand in humanity the power that you have when you're alone and you have ample time to think and to digest the reality of life and to come up with solutions and individual thought, you become a dangerous person.
Oh, absolutely.
Because now you're a free, independent soul.
Free thinkers are dangerous.
They are very dangerous, especially to a society.
Yeah, or a government structure or any sort of a...
Anything that wants
Absolutely.
to control the masses.
Sure.
Whatever
Yeah.
that may be.
Yeah, and that goes back to the conversation you were having earlier, Ben, about people with heightened intelligence. A lot of times spend a lot of time alone. You look at somebody who studies, they've got a PhD or something. They couldn't get that PhD if they spent 3 days a week hanging out with their buddies.
No.
There's no way you can accomplish those sort of goals. So that goes back into what I was saying before, the strength of being alone and being okay with being alone and understanding that's just part of the human condition and understanding this is one of my strongest moments in my life that I can ever have. I say this to people all the time. I have friends that get divorced or they break up with somebody from a long-term relationship. Like, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm like, you need to stop. Don't get in a relationship. Don't jump into something. Spend some time with yourself. Solve any of the problems that you have. Maybe get yourself out of debt. Maybe if you don't have a good living situation, focus on little things to make you stronger, because this is the time that you have the power to be alone and to be strong. Being alone shouldn't be viewed as weakness. It should be viewed as power, because when you're with somebody, if you're in a codependent relationship and all of a sudden you have to pay this other person's bills, you have to solve this other person's problems, you have to take on all of their issues and dilemmas in life, that weakens you as a person, because you don't get to focus on yourself. Some people love that, some people thrive on that, but it doesn't give you strength to build your character and your life existence to a better place because now you're preoccupied. So being alone should be viewed as one of those times where this is a gift to you. And I always tell that to my friends that become single after a weird relationship or something. I said, this is a gift. This is time. You don't have a lot of time in life. You only have so much, and you don't know how much of it you have. So when you're free and you're an individual by yourself, this is a gift for you to reorganize, rethink, and to get yourself straightened out, to be a more powerful, productive, intelligent human being. It's a lot of power.
Well said, sir. Well said. Let's take a step into a bigger realm. There was some other stuff I wanted to discuss here on the larger scale as far as humanity goes, and possibly other entities, other intelligent entities out there. Human beings have a characteristic that we start when we're very young. Our group size changes. That we have a natural motivation to by a need. Let's see, I'm not even saying that right. A natural motivation to need or to belong by others, accepted by a group mentality, so to speak, or group acceptance, I guess is what I'm looking for. And we seem to self-define that group if there is no group, or we seem to create that group with what we have to work with. Now, what I mean by that is when you're in elementary school, there's your classroom, right? That's most of your life is in your one classroom. So your group that you want to belong with is somehow defined within that. Maybe it's a group of small friends. Maybe you want it to be defined with
the popular kids.
Exactly. Your popular nature usually hits us around junior high puberty, right? All of a sudden, you want to be popular within your realm of people. I think that mentality stays with us, obviously, through high school, because there's the certain groups and cliques that you want to be in. Again,
you want to be valedictorian, don't you?
Yeah. Again, you're fighting to be accepted or belong in some group, whether you're with the gangbangers or the jocks or whatever the hell your group is. You're fighting for acceptance to feel that you belong into that group. We never lose that. And this is what I was playing at earlier with the how it would change humanity if we found another group. Right now, our groups, as we continue getting bigger, all of a sudden your group is maybe your job at work, which let's say there's 1,000 people that work for your company, or maybe your group becomes your city. I'm very proud of, or your team that you go for, or whatever. Or maybe it's even larger, like your political party. I want to belong to this group, this political party. And that's what lends to this the mentality of that. This is my geographical region. I am most proud because I am Russian, or I am Chinese, or America. Or so we still stay small-minded with that need to belong to some defined group. And that's why I said earlier. I know this is taking a 180, but back to where we were earlier. If we had something that showed humanity, we weren't the only humans. All of a sudden, our group definition would change. We wouldn't just be some nationality. We would be actually looking at each other as, hey, we're all human. I know that's a concept that gets pushed around, like, oh, we're all human, we're all, yeah, but nobody, not enough of the right people who are in control believe that and promote that. So it's a beautiful idea, but it's not being put into play.
Well, how can I term this? In our current world, it's not good idea for everybody.
It's not useful because it's not easily to manipulate.
It's not useful for all of us to understand that we're all people.
True.
On the same trip.
So if we had another species, the Vulcans or whatever, the Klingons. Yeah, exactly. The Zerglings, that we had to, for some reason or another, be it positive or negative, band together, we would redefine our group, just as we have done our entire lives. And when we redefine that group, it would be under the umbrella of just human. And that would band us together in a larger scale. And hopefully that, again, tying this all back to this conversation in the first place, hopefully make us feel less alone as a species. We would at least have another, I've always thought anyway, I don't know what psychological effects it would have.
We as humans need a common foe, Is that what you're saying?
So that is one thing that will unite people for sure, right? I mean, that war has united and torn both sides, done both things since the beginning of our existence.
Right.
And that's why the first time we talked about this earlier was either a united threat against us, or that's why I came up with the a beautiful place to go, like something that was just so unimaginably better than what we are here, that we all want to get there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that somebody knocked on my door and trying to hand me a pamphlet convinced me of that.
Right.
But only certain people get in, so
Right.
Sorry, buddy. You're gonna have to work really hard, and you don't stand a chance anyway. The numbers don't add
These
up.
two kids in these really horrible BMX bikes.
Yeah, them too.
Those guys.
Oh, you get your own star with that one, so
Yeah.
everybody wins on that one.
But I'm with you. But I'm with you though. It's almost like if there was an immediate threat to humanity, is that the only way that humanity could come together as a people? Because we're always going to be different. And I've said this for most of my life. As long as there's two people, there's room for an argument.
Yeah. It takes two to tango.
Right? So I mean, yeah.
That's a good one. I like that. As long as there's two people, there's room for an argument. Yep, that's pretty much it. So, yeah, I don't know what it would take to actually band the human species together to make us that might, because I was trying to look for something along the lines of, as I've thought about this over the course of my life, what would make us feel less lonely? And I know those people knocking on the door will be, well, the Holy Jeebus, of course.
Right. That's their solution. That's their version.
But what is that doing? Now, it's funny to laugh at for those that don't believe in that stuff, but really, what is that saying? If everybody follows a singular thing and believes that they are part of something greater under this other entity, what is that the same thing as doing? What I just described. If we found aliens and they were either bad or good, we would band together under this similar, union with a similar idea set, and we would follow this other thing together. So following, sheep, same direction, common denominator. This is what religion has been doing.
Lemmings.
Yes, this is what religion has been trying to do forever, to fight this loneliness that is inherent. This is one of the reasons religion works. Actually, it's part of the essence of it.
Well, it's also because they are able to hone in on your weakness.
Well, yes, there's multiple angles that they use, obviously, but one of them plays off of that inherent
And
weakness.
loneliness is a huge weakness for
absolutely,
humans.
and then creating guilt, and then playing off of the guilt that you've instilled. Is guilt and loneliness are the two biggest.
You're guilty of being alone and playing with yourself.
Don't touch that; you'll go blind. Yes, absolutely. So, but those ones aside, it's the exact same concept that we would experience if. And I've always wondered. I've always wished I could be around when we discover that there are aliens, and what would the religious people say? Because none of their books really, specify that. Now they'd probably say that those aliens were made by whatever God they believe in too. And then that plays perfectly.
That was the foreword that got removed from the book.
Yeah, we lost that book.
Right.
It got damaged.
That chapter somebody spilled coffee on that chapter.
Coffee. Yeah, exactly. But
Some bean juice.
Never not the bean juice. At $33 a gallon. I wonder what bean juice cost back then, man.
In outer space, it could be really expensive.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking back in time, like a couple of mules. And
I wonder if Starbucks would be the first coffee place on the moon.
Wow, assuming we terraform the moon or land or build something.
Well, I mean, ultimately,
Mars.
we're going to need to be able to make ourselves independent of this rock to survive.
Right.
I mean,
That's a good point, too.
long-term
Right.
survival of our species. This planet has a finite lifespan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Elon already has a plan for permanent installations on Mars, and the first step is from the moon.
Mr. Musk?
Yeah. The first installation I was reading that he was talking about was on the moon.
Slingshotting from the moon to Mars or something.
Well, I think if I remember correctly, what he was talking about was launching from the moon is a heck of a lot easier than launching from Earth because the gravitational force is much less. So you need less propulsion, and there's a lot of other physics and sciencey stuff that I don't fully understand. But
Wonder how lonely he is.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, he's trying to solve this by making a neural uplink to his brain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, you talk about intelligence and how lonely you would be. You watch that guy in his factory. I mean, he's got to be a lonely individual because the amount of depth that he knows, the amount of rabbit holes he knows the depth of.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
if
if you think back in time of philosophers, like Plato and people like this,
Aristotle.
Socrates, Aristotle, these people were definitely pretty lonely because they had random ideas and very outrageous ideas in their own time. And that, this spark of like loneliness of existence and people and going back to the intelligent thing. And I've always said that from a long time, the more intelligent you are, the more alone you are, because you're segregating yourself from the rest of humanity. And that also goes back into play of like, you take people who are more intelligent, have fewer kids than people who are not quite as intelligent.
Oh, the idiocracy effect?
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
go into that whole aspect of life.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that movie,
Do it.
just put everything down right now. Go buy it.
Go away, I'm baiting.
It's going to seem ridiculous, but think about the concepts. It's very applicable to our daily or our current state and time, at least in this country. Yeah. I forgot my train of thought of where I was going with that. We already talked about how it can breed creativity, yes. So now going back to the individualistic, I know we had taken a step to the larger scale.
Big
there,
left
whatever.
turn.
And Glenn had mentioned too, that was one of the points I wanted to make too, that it can increase focus on oneself and concentration, and then amidst the distractions that exist around us. Not necessarily on a meditative level, but definitely on a individualistic me time level for sure. And I mean, if it can help us as individuals in that nature, what effect would it have on us as a whole, like as a whole species? That's what makes me so curious about the whole. If we ever find, aliens or whatever, maybe there are other humans on a different planet that we just, that somehow we got split and evolved exactly the same. Whatever it may be, it would mean that we were not the only intelligent beings in the universe, and not confined to this rock in particular. But I don't know.
That's a conversation for a whole nother time.
I think it is. And speaking of time, we're about out of time on this one. We're going to cut this a little bit short. We're still about good here. So until next time, we're glad we have you guys at least. So
we're not so alone out there.
So at least we can all be lonely together. Thanks for listening.
Give us all a hug.
Yeah, there you go. Give yourselves a hug. Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time. Show notes and other info can be found at our website, greatdistraction.com. The Great Distraction is listed in iTunes, and we greatly appreciate it when our listeners take the time to look us up and leave us a 5-star rating and review. That helps our show grow and motivates us to continue producing content. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so using the email address, greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com, or via our website. We're always interested in hearing any thoughts, comments, or questions from our listeners. Keeping up on the latest from us can be done in several different ways. You can add us to your favorite RSS feed tracker. The link is available on our website or in iTunes. Or you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Great Distraction, one word, no space. As always, thank you for listening, and thank you for all the support.